A guy reincarnates into another world, a skill that doesn't just make water his domain, but also lets him tame, awakening a powerful ability called water manipulation aquatic beasts, turning them into his loyal pets. But he doesn't stop there. As he evolves them, pushing them past their natural limits until they become terrifying. Sea monsters, now let's dive in. The story takes place in a distant land where Liang-ku stood dazed, taking in the breathtaking view of the rising sun. The golden light painted the sky, and the fresh, cold breeze of the morning filled his lungs. It was peaceful, almost surreal. But before he could fully lose himself in the moment, his father's voice called out to him, snapping him back as if it were a sound he hadn't heard in years yet. Despite that, it felt familiar, warm, comforting. Without a second thought, he rushed to his father, determined to make the most of the day. They spent the morning on the lake, checking on the fish they had caught. It was like any other day, but it was fun. Probably the most fun he had in a long time. Like how a crab managed to latch onto his foot, his father nearly choking on their food from laughing too hard, and even leaving some carved scribbles on the side of their boat, just for the hell of it. It was simple, but it was enough to make him forget everything else. He hadn't even realized how quickly time passed until the sun was already setting. But before heading back with their catch, they decided to sit by the shore and enjoy the view a little longer. That was when he noticed a red carp swimming by. Its scales were glimmering under the fading sunlight. It was a rare sight, and so, without hesitation, Liang-ku dived into the water, but the moment he hit the surface, the fish was gone and everything around him. The lake was empty with no signs of life, and no matter how hard he struggled, he couldn't move forward. Like something was holding him in place, and suddenly his chest tightened. His limbs grew heavier, and the only thing on his mind was hoping his father would pull him out. But the world around him dimmed. And just like that, he woke up, except his father wasn't there. Instead, two strangers stood in front of him, and that's when reality hit. The day with his father was all just a dream in truth. He was tied up, captured by these bastards. Shang had tricked him, making him believe he was guiding them, but in reality, they just wanted to use him as bait for the water monster, a cruel fate. But Liang-ku remained calm because this wasn't his first life. The young kid was a transmigrator from another world. It's already been a month since he arrived in this world. Taking over this body, the original owner had died from an illness, and somehow he ended up here in his place. His mother died in childbirth, leaving him to be raised by his father alone. And for years, it was just the two of them until 3 months ago, when his father succumbed to a respiratory disease. But now all those emotions, the grief, the loneliness, and the longing had become his own. And that was something new for him, as he had never known what it felt like to grow up with a family. Still, in the past month, he had adapted to the former owner's relationships and daily life. He had also discovered something else. This world wasn't normal. It possessed extraordinary powers. People here could train their bodies and minds to reach incredible states, surpassing human limits. Those who succeeded were called cultivators, but it wasn't just humans who could evolve through training. Animals could too. And those who did were known as mythical beasts. And speaking of the devil, one had just appeared right below them. Even Jung, a seasoned cultivator, felt his legs go weak the moment he laid eyes on it. He had expected the water beast to be about half a meter long, but it turns out the info was all wrong. And the moment it surfaced, it easily rocked the boat, sending ripples of panic through everyone on board. But Zhang wasn't the type to go down without a fight. But yet, he had trained for 10 years. And if this thing wanted to swallow them whole, it would have to work for it. So the second the beast lunged closer, he went all in, unleashing his strongest. Moved to meet it halfway. But motherfucker was huge. Its jaws alone were bigger than him. And before he could even process what was happening, he was gone, swallowed whole like a bite-sized snack. The boat shattered into pieces in the process. So the old guy was absolutely panicking. Never planned to die here. This wasn't part of the script. The way things were going, he needed a plan, and fast. And that's when the bright idea hit him. So without hesitation, he stabbed our boy's hand and shoved him straight into the water, hoping the blood would serve as a distraction. And because Liang-ku was still tied up, his body sank straight down and dragged by the weight of his restraints. But he wasn't going down without a fight. He thrashed against the ropes and then bited it. His teeth clamped down hard, tearing at the rough fibers. It wasn't easy, but after a few agonizing moments, the ropes loosened just enough for him to break free. But now there was another problem. His oxygen was running out, and he had already sunk too deep. His vision blurred, darkness creeping in at the edges, and that's when vision started appearing again. His father's arm extended toward him, and though Liang-ku knew it wasn't real, his body moved on instinct, reaching out. That's when his hand found something solid. It was a log. Same log from his father's boat. the one they had carved their faces into all those years ago. A rush of emotions hit him all at once. Gratitude, relief, even a small bit of warmth despite the freezing water around it. Somehow, even in death, his father had saved him once again. But that moment didn't last because the blood from his wound had already spread, and the monster had caught his scent before he could react. Sharp teeth clamped onto his leg. The next thing he knew, he was being dragged downward deeper into the lake. The pressure built up in his chest, and the light from above faded completely as the beast pulled him into the depths of its lair, and what he saw there sent a shiver down his spine. Countless bodies long since devoured, wrecked boats shattered into pieces, and treasure piles of it glimmering like a cruel joke in the darkness. This was it. He had done everything he could to survive. But it was obvious now there was no escaping this. So, with what little breath he had left, he closed his eyes and whispered a silent apology to his father, because soon he would be joining him. But the water beast was just like cut that shit out and slammed him to the ground, toying with him like a predator playing with its food. Pain shut through his body, but then something happened. His blood drifting through the water seeped into the lake bed and touched something ancient, a forgotten treasure, buried beneath a wreckage, a water cauldron, and within it, an ancient being stirred. In that moment, power surged through the Yanku's body. Something foreign, yet strangely familiar, adapted to him, shaping itself into a form. He could instinctively understand something akin to the games he used to play before he transmigrated. A power manifested in the form of a game system, and its primary ability water manipulation. The change was immediate. The water around him was no longer his enemy. It was his domain. His wounds closed, his body strengthened, and suddenly it felt as if he was standing on solid ground, as if water resistance no longer existed for him, making him question how any of this was possible. And as if responding to his thoughts, a system notification popped up, explaining everything he had obtained: a skill water control, which grants the ability to manipulate water currents and allows breathing underwater. A powerful skill, one that turned the depths of the lake into his battlefield. But before he could even process his newfound abilities, the beast struck again, lunching forward to finally devour him. This time, Yanku wasn't helpless with just a thought. The water twisted and surged, catching the beast mid-swim and suspending it in place. A rush of power filled him, intoxicating feeling that made him realize if he was underwater. The system responded. It turns out he wasn't just a simple waterbender. As he had other skill called blood domination through his own blood, he could inscribe ancient ruins, forming a contract with aquatic spirit beasts, a revelation that made his pulse quicken, as this was exactly what he needed, and in just a second, he already had a plan. The moment surged toward him again. He used water control, forcing it to stop just long enough to inscribe necessary runes, creating a blood domination talisman. As soon as the beast broke free from his waterhold, he weaved around its massive form and slammed the talisman to its head. Forming a contract was easier said than done. It was a battle of spiritual force. The beast fought back, lashing out with the intent to crush his very soul. His vision darkened, his body stiffened. For a moment, it felt like the creature's will was completely overwhelming his own. But unfortunately for it, our boy had a soul that had lived twice, and with its combined strength, Liangku was able to push back his soul. Energy surged and overpowered the beast's resistance, and in the end, he won. The contract was sealed, and thus, the Yangku floated back to the surface, breaking through the water with a deep, desperate inhale. The air filled his lungs. For the first time since the whole ordeal began, he could finally breathe a sigh of relief. Beast emerged right after him, no longer an enemy, an ally.